A nation devastated by a pandemic, more than 225,000 dead.
Anyone who's responsible for that many deaths should not remain as President of the United States of America.
Social injustice and unrest across the country also dominating the political debate.
Black Lives Matter! Black Lives Matter!
He did such harm to the black community, and he called them super predators.
Control of the Senate also at stake, along with key congressional races here on Long Island. The political climate triggering a tidal wave of voters flooding into polling places in what may be the most important election in a lifetime. Welcome to Newsday's special election coverage. I'm Jessie. The time is now 10 o'clock. The polls have been closed for an hour. And throughout the night, we'll be bringing you results in key races as they come in, as well as in-depth analysis from Newsday's political team of experts. Long Islanders and people around the world are waiting to see how the race for president ends up. Here's a quick overview for the battle of the White House. It looks like it's a really tight race there between Trump and Biden. Another balance of power in the U.S. House of Representatives. Looks like the Republicans have 80 seats, the Democrats have 57. And we are closely monitoring the balance of power for the Senate. It looks like the Democrats are at 41, the Republicans at 39. As you all know, these numbers are going to be changing throughout the night. Now for some early local numbers. Here's a look at the race for the 3rd U.S. Congress 3rd District, where incumbent Tom Suozzi is being challenged by Republican George DeVolder Santos. And it looks like right now Suozzi up there in the numbers. Once again, these numbers going to be changing. Newsday caught up with Nassau Democratic Party Chief Jay Jacobs. He says he's pleased with the turnout this election.
See a record-breaking turnout here in Nassau County. I think Suffolk County is seeing an enormous vote as well. And it's pretty even between Democrats and Republicans. Democrats came out earlier with the early voting and the paper ballots, and Republicans were out in force today. So, you know, they're catching up quite a bit, and we'll see how it all turns out. But at the end of the day, I feel very good about where we are.
Joining us now, our team of political experts are back with us. Let's say hello again to columnist Joy Brown, White House correspondent Laura Figueroa Hernandez, and Albany Bureau Chief Yancey Roy. Once again, joining us from a socially distant set for those of you all who weren't here with our first hour at 9 o'clock. Laura, I want to start with you again. You were talking to me earlier about this pull for suburban voters. We know that there's a lot of suburbs out here on Long Island. Talk to us about the importance of those votes.
So if you talk to political analysts, they'll tell you that the road to the White House runs through America's suburbs. And throughout this election, both Biden and Trump have made aggressive appeals to suburban voters, particularly suburban women voters. It's a voting bloc that is consistently a swing bloc, but also a very reliable voting bloc. Women tend to outnumber men in terms of voting in presidential elections. And throughout the campaign, we heard President Trump appeal to the, quote, suburban housewives of America, and, made messages that he would keep their communities safe and he would preserve their husbands' jobs through this pandemic. And I think it's an interesting argument that he made at a time that a lot of economists are pointing at numbers that show that women have been more adversely affected by this pandemic in terms of job loss. We saw labor statistics come out in September that showed nearly 900,000 women opted out of the workforce, and this comes at a time that women are, having to look over their children, being homeschooled as schools are shut or there's virtual learning, and so polls showed throughout the last couple of months that Trump was losing support with this essential voting bloc, and that this group was really siding towards Biden. So we'll see how the night goes. And in terms of Long Island and the suburbs, I reached out to two Long Islanders who've been helping out with the national campaigns. Former Suffolk GOP chairman John J. Laval, he's part of Trump's national campaign committee, and he's actually in D.C. participating in some of the Trump campaign events tonight. And he's, just early tonight, they're feeling energized by the victory in Florida. They're saying that, they know that Democrats came out in larger numbers earlier in early voting, but that they feel that they're going to gain some traction now throughout the night. I also reached out to former Long Island Congressman Steve Israel. He is advising the Biden campaign, and he told me a while ago that, one of the suburbs that he was particularly looking at was St. Petersburg, Pinellas County, Florida. So we know that Florida went for Trump, but Israel said, look at St. Petersburg because it will tell you what the rest of the night might look like for Biden. And when you look at the numbers coming out of Pinellas County, Biden actually won that county, but by a small margin, by only 1,000 votes. So if you're looking at that kind of county as a bellwether for how Biden and Trump will perform in the suburbs, then it's going to be a tight race and it's going to be a long night.
And thank you so much. And I'm glad you mentioned tight races. Yancey, I want to bring up something that you mentioned in our first hour, the difference in counting the votes this year. Because these races are so tight, some of these results could change in the coming days.
Yes, that's right, especially in these key races. I mean, we've got two big congressional races right here on Long Island up for grabs. In the far eastern side of Long Island, numbers just trickling in. Lee Zeldin a little bit ahead of Nancy Goroff in that race so far, but absentee ballots are going to play a big role there. And here's something that we do know is in that race, about 31,000 Democrats have returned their absentee ballot to the Board of Election. Only about 15,000 Republicans. So folks, be patient because the numbers could change as we go into not just tonight, but all through election week. Same story in Congressional District 2, which runs along the South Shore. Andrew Garbarino, Jackie Gordon vying it right there. Garbarino leading right now in very, very early numbers, the Republican leading. But again, right there, 23,000 Democrats have already turned in an absentee ballot, but have yet to have their vote counted, and only 13,000 Republicans. And on another note, although we're not getting much yet on the state legislative elections on Long Island, we are getting some numbers from upstate New York, especially some important Senate battles. And what we're seeing right now is Democrats ahead in 6 or 7 toss-up districts across the state, whether you're looking at Syracuse, the Capital Region, even the North Country, which has always been a Republican stronghold. These are very early numbers, but in the first hour since the poll closed, we're seeing Democrats ahead in state Senate races. And what does this mean? It means that they could, in the night with a supermajority in the Senate, and really be strengthened to push a even more liberal agenda through the State House in Albany.
Thank you so much, Yancey. And I want to ask Joy, our columnist here, about the push for, I guess, the wave, if you will, of new voters. And some of those new voters that don't say that they're Democrat or Republican. They're right down the middle. They're independent. How does that have an effect on these races?
Well, it's interesting because if you take a look at Nassau and Suffolk, no major party has a majority. Republicans need third-party voters to win. Democrats need third-party voters to win. The thing about Republicans, especially in Nassau, is that they are reliable voters. Republicans in Nassau will turn out. And Yancey mentioned the Garabino race. This is the race for Peter King's seat. Garabino lives in Suffolk County. We're getting numbers preliminary, and they're going to change. We'll see how that goes, from Nassau County, that part of that district. And Garabino is looking pretty good over there. I had talked to the Nassau County Republican chairman, Joe Cairo, and he told me that Garabino had come over, that Peter King had taken him around, that Garabino really pulled out the stops in that Nassau County portion of the district. And that becomes important because Peter King his last 2 times around lost the Suffolk County part of that district, and he kept his seat by an overwhelming majority of voters in the Nassau County part of that district going for it. As far as independent voters, these are blanks. What we found is that for voters who had registered for the first time on Long Island, they may have been in other places, but for this election, a lot of blanks, and the majority of the newer voters were millennials and Zoomers. And in talking to all 4 party chairmen, both the Democrat and Republican in Nassau and the Democrat and Republican in Suffolk, what they tell me is that these are voters that have to be wooed. They are not dependably Democratic voters. They're not dependably Republican voters. So as the night goes on, we're going to take a look not just at in terms of Republicans and Democrats, we also got to keep an eye out for those independents and especially for those young voters as well.
Absolutely. And thank you so much, Joy. The night is still very young. We'll be checking with them throughout the night. For now, that is what we have for you. Make sure to stay here for all of your coverage. We'll be giving you the results as they come in. You can also get them up to the minute on our website. For Newsday, I'm Faith Jessie.